Good afternoon, welcome back. Tracy Daly with Checkmate Chapter 22. Before I jump in, very quickly, podcasts live and die on their reviews and their downloads. The same can be said, especially if you're self-published, the same can be said for authors. And I've been trying to push more and more reviews as much as I can recently away from the podcast, until, although the downloads are getting better and better, I found one of the Amazon reviews just completely vanished. I don't know if you can take them away yourself, or whether this is a problem with Amazon, or whether KDP, or whether it'll come back in time, but I know that Tracy's story had 50 plus 4.5 star reviews, many 5, many 4. A couple lower that's brought it down to about 4.5 star reviews. So if you've liked it, loved it, hated it, can you go and review it for me? Because if it gets up to something like, I think it's 120 or 150, then Amazon will advertise it. When somebody buys a book that's similar or under a similar theme, then they'll get recommended my book too. So I'd really appreciate that. That'd be great. And the one that was on Checkmate, there was 30 plus 5-star reviews on there. 30 exactly 5-star reviews on there, and one of them just completely vanished. So here I am trying to plug the reviews, and if you know how, I can't figure out how to do it on Apple as of yet, but I will try. But if you know how to review the podcast, we'd appreciate it if you do that as well. That'd be awesome. Thank you. I'm going to continue where I left off, which was a very unique time for me, one that I wouldn't change for the world in some respects. And in others, I look back and I think, what on earth was going on with me? What had made me to that point that I was witnessing those things? And I can't say I don't believe it to this day, because I was there. And it's not a case of believing it, it's a case of knowing it happened. You know, maybe that's why. Maybe people took a look at the, I won't say belief system, but maybe people got to a stage here and they went, you know what, I don't agree with that. I've met people like that, and that's fine too. I don't believe in a lot of things, but you know, maybe that's why, and they just went, you know, I don't support that review. I don't know, maybe it's something, maybe it's nothing. Anyway, let's carry on where we left off. You decide. You give me your feedback. Too soon, Graham said. Why let me feel or understand too soon, if it was too soon? Why not just pretend nobody has heard? How are you finding this, apart from me? You can understand me? I asked the white dog. No language, all feelings, he replied as way of explanation, and turned away and walked straight through the wall. You won't believe this, I told Courtney. I went on to explain about the dog, which I kept calling a husky-type dog, but wasn't a husky, and it really annoyed me for ages that I didn't know there was a dog called a Samoyed, which is what Sammy was. Graham was a regular occurrence for around 3 weeks, maybe longer. I didn't tell Meghan at first. We'd become regular online couple. It was a weird thing to say the least, but it worked for us. No attachment, no physical expectations. Neither of us had seen the pictures of the other. I'd literally got to the point where I could turn on and off the spiritual side almost at will. Sometimes were worse than others, but I mostly got clear connections, so I presumed Graham would be around forever. However, I wanted to progress personally with whatever this situation was. I wanted to know more about it, how to use it, what it could be good for, and what ways it worked. Meghan said she knew about birth charts, tarot and horoscopes. She'd later tell me she collected crystals. I knew very little about any of these things. She lived in Kent, which was a long way away from me, and she had an overpowering mother. Apparently her ex had abused her sexually and physically, and I believed her. It wasn't until a couple of weeks down the line that the stories started to take a more sinister turn. I worked for MI6, she told me on the phone one day. I presumed it was some kind of weird roleplay thing, and I turned it into a joke. Later on she approached the subject again. I work for MI6, she said simply, not usually in context to anything. Don't you mean MI5? I asked, never having heard of MI6. No, I was a secret agent. She went on to tell me a story about her being an assassin hired by the government. However, none of her stories added up. She tripped up several times explaining the weapons she'd used incorrectly. I cared enough to know something wasn't right, and that she was a bit weird, but not enough to actually think anything serious could come out of her lies. After all, she was listening to me rattling on about my past. I had told some huge lies, and she'd accepted me where I'd told her the truth. Perhaps it was time I broke down some of her barriers. Who knows? Perhaps it'd work out. I told her that her story fell apart, but that I didn't care that she'd lied. She insisted she hadn't lied, and that she'd been having panic attacks due to her agoraphobia and depression, and that she'd took too many tranquilizers, which made her act funny and yet would say silly things. Having no experience of tranquilizers, I took this at face value. I confided in her about me wanting to join the army, and Courtney saying about the baby. I spent half that night in tears. Most of our conversations were online. Meghan could read just fine, but her spelling was poor due to a form of dyslexia that she had. I was talking to Courtney about Meghan when she asked if I'd told her about Graham yet. I said no as an idea hit me. "Pass me a book," I said, pointing to the bookshelf. She grabbed a history book and I flicked through it until it fell on a picture of an Egyptian death mask. "Perfect," I said. It wasn't real because it was a clay copy of the mask. I intended to tune into that and see what I could pick up. I gave the book back to Courtney, having taken a mental picture. For the next 10 minutes, I relaxed my breathing and found the vibration, then increased it whilst concentrating on the image in my head. The image became fully formed and turned golden with green and orange around the neck area. Then when I got nothing more, I'd finally had enough and tried closing down. I couldn't. "Won't go away," I told Courtney. "Oh," she replied helpfully. "Suggestions?" I asked her, panicking slightly, but trying to keep a lid on things. "It's in my head, perhaps a quarter to the right, covering over a quarter of my sight, and it won't go away. It's not a spirit, it doesn't communicate, but it won't leave either," I told her. I was worried after 5 minutes, and after 10 I tried drinking, eating, having a wash, and jumping up and down, but nothing was working. I put the TV on and I told it to leave. I swore at it. I visualised it vanishing. No luck. Eventually, after a couple of hours, it just ceased to be there. I threw the book away and vowed to learn to control it. I called the first psychic medium I could find, with all the extras in a magazine for £1.50 a minute. The medium was intent on giving me a reading that I wasn't interested in. I had 2 questions. How can I learn more about this? And how can I turn it off? After giving me all the options for every amazing reading under the sun, the lady asked if I wanted her to use the cards for my question. By now I was a little aggravated. "Listen, love, I just want you to tell me how you learn this spirit stuff and how to turn it off." She told me I needed to find a spirit circle, which would be found at a spiritualist church. I told her I wasn't religious, and she explained it wasn't that kind of church. I headed to my nearest spiritual church, which was filled with elderly couples, and me at 18. I stuck out like a sore thumb. I got several questions from thinking I was waiting for my nan to "Do you work for the newspaper?" I gave bland answers to all. I didn't want anyone knowing anything about me and then tell me things about me they'd heard from a ghost. I was very sceptical of everyone, including myself. I felt sorry for them though. They were looking for someone to tell them their wife, child, parent or other loved one existed. They hoped they did, and it kept them going back for some sort of comfort. I guess many were worried about when they would pass, and I was in a strange position I didn't usually find myself in, because for once I was lucky. I knew we lived on. Not new as in having faith, or new as though I know someone is, as though I know tomorrow is Wednesday. I can't see or feel Wednesday, and I'd seen and felt Graham. Wednesday was made up, it wasn't tangible. Time was made up by us. Graham was made by? My inner questions were endless. As soon as I answered one, another 10 appeared. We all went from the corridor, which smelt like an old second-hand shop's clothing department, to the main hall with the stage. Donations were taken at the door, and a woman after woman got up and gave messages. I sat straight-faced. I saw no spirits, and I felt no presences. "I have a woman who passed in her 50s here of chest pains. I feel tight in my chest. Can anyone claim this woman?" a lady asked from the stage. She was talking to a room of at least 40 by this stage. Several hands shot up and I was not impressed. "A name?" Why doesn't the spirit know where their relative is? Why aren't they gesturing like Graham had? The night continued in this fashion, and only one woman came close to giving near clear messages. I caught up with her after the presentation. "How'd you turn it off?" I asked her, as she sat at a table with several others. "What an odd question, child. Why would you want to do that?" she asked. I didn't answer. She was surrounded by sheep, and had a holier-than-thou attitude. I could feel her getting a kick out of being the centre of attention. "Never mind," I said, walking away. "Buy a lucky heather, dear, and all your worries will be gone by the time you leave," she said, producing a basket from nowhere. "No thanks, you need it more than me," I said as I left. I could almost feel the scorn staring me in the back. I returned every week for a couple of months, and then gave up. Graham was regular. I'd just have to accept that stuff I didn't want to happen would happen. I told Courtney I need to talk to Graham, because as amazing as this was, it couldn't just keep happening. I need a warning, or to be able to turn it off or something. What if I'm eating and then zap, I'm out of my body, I choke to death or something? No thanks. Or I'm in the bath and a spook just walks in to chat. Graham explained to me we have a personal space that cannot be invaded unless we choose it. He went on to say that they're all around all of the time, yet want no part to intrude any more than we do to them. He did make two very good points. If I didn't want to be here, I wouldn't come. And if your mind wasn't level with mine, you wouldn't see me, even if I did come. It actually made perfect sense. It made me realise more about my life than I thought about previously. I chose to be at Courtney's, although I didn't want to be there. Yes, other paths were hard, but I was here to learn and experience, not to dick around. As an adult, I had a choice over everything. They might be shitty choices sometimes, but they were choices. I called Meghan. "Want to visit her? I'll probably not be going home too," I added. "What? When? Really?" She sounded excited. "Tomorrow, okay?" I asked her. "Sure. Love you," she shouted down the phone. "Tomorrow then," I replied, hanging up. I never said I love you unless I meant it. I didn't like it. Nan said it all the time, and then she hurt Caroline. Alan loved me and he let it happen. Wenzel loved me and he killed Mum. Fuck love. When I love, I'll do it properly. I got the train to London from Manchester. Just me, a good book and my mobile phone. Although I'd figured out chat rooms, I was now 20 and had no clue how a PC worked. I followed the directions given to me by staff at each station. I enjoyed watching the farmland whiz past me. I called Meghan. Won't be long now. I see horses, sheep. I went on in a similar vein about the beauty of the countryside. I'd never thought about it much before. It was always just there, my security blanket. If shit turned bad anywhere and I couldn't find a secure place to stay, I always had my northern countryside. I could build a bivouac anywhere, and it was home. The country soon started to change to towns, which were much bigger than those up north, and even bigger buildings. I then had to change to the underground. I'd been on trams many times and I enjoyed them, so I thought it wouldn't be much different. I hit London Station and headed for the big underground sign where I put my ticket through a turnstile, noting we had these up north to segregate the cattle. I walked through a large dome and onto an escalator, the only way being downwards, and there were hundreds of people. Everyone was in a hurry. I presumed it was the time of day. No morning, no chat, just a simple, one-directed mindset. I'm heading this way, now. Their body language was horribly distorted into robot drones, their minds presumably left at home. I felt so many scrambled edges coming off at once. I'm late, it's always packed, only 5 more days. I started to feel their anxiety underneath their cloak of robotic compliance. I wasn't a quarter of the way down the escalator when I got a glance ahead of me through the crowds, and by ahead I mean straight down, almost vertical, a very, very long way. My rucksack and I didn't think things through. We did a complete 360 and took off like a shot, running through people back up the escalator. My voice polite but uncaring. "Excuse me, coming through, excuse me." We didn't have stupid amounts of heights up north. We herded cattle, not each other, and people were losing their damn minds down there. I felt trapped and terrified of falling at the same time. I wasn't turning into a drone for anyone. I had no idea why I felt this way. My legs were still pumping where I saw the top of the turnstile. I ran at it as a hand hit my shoulder in an attempt to stop me. I sidestepped, flipped a 180 and carried on running. I got to the turnstile and dropped to my knees with the ticket held in the air as the ticket guard reached me. I was panting heavily. "Too fucking high," I said, gasping for breath. The ticket guy was giving me a rollicking. "You can't come this way, you can't do that, I check bag, yada yada." I stood up. "Here's my ticket. I need to go down there. Bit high, that's all, mate. Didn't expect it. Is it flat down there?" He checked my ticket and said I could get a bus or a cab to the other London station. "Which is fastest?" I asked him. He pointed down the escalator. "Which is cheapest?" I asked, knowing I'd already paid for the tube. He pointed again to the tube station. Fuck it, I had no choice. I got back on the escalator and down through a tunnel into a maze of other tunnels, each leading to a dead end they like to call platforms. I was reminded of Arnie, my gerbil, who I used to put in a ball so he could run around and not go anywhere. I now understood why he ran so fast. Standing there waiting for what I presumed to be an underground train, I felt stuck. People were reading papers or listening to Walkmans. I asked 2 people if this one went to my stop. They both gave me a yes grunt of acknowledgement and looked at me as though I was a moron. The higher IQ'd of the 2 drones even pointed to the tiled tube like an extension that counted as a wall here, and I'd missed it. I saw no map. I saw a line with dots and names, and my dot wasn't on it. Give me a real map any day. I did my best Mr. Happy impersonation. "Thanks, I really appreciate it. First time here, no idea where I am." Mr. Businessman turned back to his Financial Times just as my silver bullet-shaped thing appeared a foot in front of me. I got on, and nobody made eye contact. I'd been told often growing up that Southerners were rude, but this was another world, and again I was on my guard. I tuned out after a couple of minutes of darkness and not actually certain if I was going anywhere. If it wasn't for the people randomly leaning into each other due to the bullets' movements, then I wouldn't have known. Train wasn't an accurate description. A train viewed the countryside. It was an enjoyable experience. This spectacle was not enjoyable, and it felt like it could explode at any minute. When I finally got off, I had to climb 2 escalators to get to the exit. I intuitively knew people had been trapped down here, as I felt the urge to run through the crowds, despite everyone moving at a reasonable pace. I felt stuck, like I couldn't escape the entanglement. I fixed my eyes on a decent pair of legs in the distance and just concentrated on them until I was out of the mass of bodies. Small heels and a white skirt kept me sane for the 3 minutes it took to get out of the tube area and into the station, where I fought with the ticket machine until a guy snapped the ticket out of my hand and jammed it into the machine. "Thanks," I shouted as he continued walking. I was just starting to feel better when I realised I was on a ledge up in the air and there were trains beneath me. Fuck! I ran to the only area that seemed open, which was to my right, and discovered I was somehow on ground level outside. I had to wait for my hands to stop shaking before I could make a roll up. I looked around for a forest, a bit of country, something I could relate to. I was on a short road with huge buildings either end and either side. In between these buildings were more buildings. In fact, any space that was at one point a space was now a building. So this was London. I looked upwards, pleased I could see the sky, but upset that it made me feel like I was falling. I had 2 choices. I could go home, or I could get the next train to my destination. Something I read came back to me. When in doubt, do nothing. I was definitely in doubt. I rolled another smoke and headed to a store which sold magazines and pop. It was basically a newsagent's inside a train station. I'd never seen that before. As far as I knew, we didn't have them up north. I pulled out £1 and grabbed a mineral water. "That's 1.85, please," the cashier said, smiling. I felt the weight of my jaw hitting my hiking boots and sink to the trains below the balcony and run all the way back to Manchester. What the hell? The parts of me that remained on autopilot, however, paid the extortion and left. The same bottle was less than £1 up north. I drank my 2 mouthfuls and headed to the information point. This bird better be worth it. The man on information was full of anything but love, and told me this huge sign gave me all the information that I'd need, and so I stood there scrutinising it. When I'd done, I returned and informed Mr. Smiley that unless I was wrong, the sign told me my train, the time and platform, but doesn't tell me where the train or the platform actually are. The question was lost on the guy, who simply grunted into the speaker piece. Luckily for me, a semi-drone was also in the queue and pointed me in the right direction. I was not a happy bunny. I remember going over a river on the train and having buildings either side of me larger than I'd ever seen. Then we seemed to be up high whilst the buildings got lower and lower. What was wrong with these people? Stop building things! These monstrosities finally evened out as we hit a place called Bromley South. I was on the phone by then, and not impressed. Right, I'm here. How do I get out of this one? Is there a maze? A river to walk through? Or am I on another fucking ledge? Meghan laughed down the phone. Go up the stairs and you're out, she said. Finally a bit of space. Still had a bus to catch, but first I wanted food. Couldn't find a chip shop anywhere that sold meat pies or sausage chips and gravy. I settled for a chip bap from a place I affectionately nicknamed Mario's because he was Italian. He, however, didn't know what a chip bap was. I had to point and discover that apparently what I wanted down here was a chip roll and not a chip bap. The fourth time that I'd tried explaining what I wanted, he asked me if I was foreign. The irony was killing me. There was a lot of people in Bromley. A lot less people in Bromley than there were in London. However, still a good 200 or so more than I was used to up north. Nobody said afternoon. I stopped after my fourth attempt. When I got on the bus, I asked the driver, how much, mate? His eyes were facing the road, not me. Depends, where you going? He asked. Up north I could pay a flat fare and stay on that thing all day if I wanted. Bromley Common Bus Garage, I recited from a text message. £1.10, he said. It was a result. Up north it was £2.40. I called Meghan once I'd get there, and she said she'd walk down and meet me. It was nicer here, and there were less people. Still no country, but at least a small amount of land. I was content that I'd meet her and see what happens. I'd be going home tonight or tomorrow though for sure. I couldn't live round here for long. But thoughts of going back to stay with Courtney, well, they weren't helping either. Okay, we go straight into chapter 23. A large woman walked around the corner, blonde and not Meghan, as she's a redhead. I remember her telling me that. Then a larger woman behind her on the phone. Nearly there, I see you, she said into my phone. Great, well done for coming out, I'm so pleased, I said, immediately wondering how she managed to get around, as she was so overweight, her thighs brushed together. Later she would inform me she was 19 stone, 5 foot 2 inches in height. Fancy a walk, she said, taking my hand. Yeah, long trip, I replied, thinking, no, but I could use a brew. Meghan told me her parents thought I was 25. I should go with that, as she's 30. Fair enough, I replied. We walked around the field near her home a couple of times. She kept referring to it as a farm. There's no way it was a farm. It wasn't big enough to be a farm. It was a field with a shed in it. After a brief walk and a chip shop stop, she introduced me to her parents. They immediately reminded me of Tony and Pip from Care. They sat glued to the TV and didn't make eye contact. I immediately got the feeling something was wrong. The house was dark and smelt of dogs. The mum was very overweight, and Dad was the total opposite. Whilst both were in their 70s, I said my hellos and was ushered into the living room by Meghan. The curtains in the living room were closed. I could feel the tension coming from the other room. To give them credit, they had replied with a hi each, but they kept staring at the TV, and didn't make eye contact with me once. It was surreal. When I asked, how are you guys, thanks for inviting me over, they totally ignored me, apart from the mum who grunted. Meghan found her electric candle and pushed the button, so it lit up, and then placed it on the table in front of me. As she leaned forward, her leg touched mine. Whether intentional or not, it was hard to tell. I moved to the sofa. Okay to sit here, I asked, trying to avoid the candle situation. Sure, she said, nipping off to make a brew. When she returned, she sat back on the well-worn sofa and leaned her head on me. I should have bolted for the door. Every instinct in my body was telling me to get out, but I was tired. And did I care that much anyway? I rested my arm on her. You did well today going out. You tired? I asked her. I can go if you want to sleep, I added gently. You don't like me. Of course I don't want you to go. You just got here, she snapped, sitting bolt upright and staring into my face. No, I didn't say that, did I? I said if you're tired, I can get to know the area and come back later. I'm not going anywhere. Christ, frying pan and fire, I thought. She had surprised me with coming across so aggressive, and I wanted to leave, but I'll be honest, I was a little concerned about her. She didn't seem quite right. I figured it was a temporary thing. Meghan spoke to me mostly about ragophobia, and didn't want to talk about much else unless it included us as a component. I ducked and dived as much as I could, but when push came to shove it boiled down to two things. I wasn't strong enough to stand up for myself, and I wasn't going back to Courtney's lies. I cared for Meghan, but I didn't love her. I knew I'd never love her. She, however, was head over heels for me, or so it seemed. I didn't even particularly like her, if I'm brutally honest. It was more a sense of responsibility. It felt like I had to be doing something to make sure she was okay. It didn't help that she seemed to have an abusive background, which I wanted so desperately to rescue her from. Whether it was because I couldn't rescue my mother, or genuine concern, I can't tell. Either way, I wasn't going to walk away like Wenzel had. I had never had anyone to teach me that, simply put, some people are just arseholes. And so, I didn't know the signs. I put the negative feelings from her parents being down to being southerners, and sucked on my brew. The water was harsher here, and I didn't like it. "Ready for dinner?" she asked me. She hadn't moved in 2 hours, and was content to sit beside me and answer any question that kept her talking, and preferably not progressing with the hand that kept breaking my leg every so often. "I had dinner on the train. Tea, perhaps," I answered, which prompted another north-south divide issue. Up north, we had breakfast, dinner, and tea, whereas down south the meals were divided into breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Meghan returned from the kitchen. "Dad's making dinner for them. Shall we eat out?" she asked. I agreed, and as I was leaving I overheard her dad. "I'm not cooking for him. Who is he? I didn't even know he was coming," he said. Wonderful. Meghan knew I'd heard, but I said nothing. We had more chips at another shop locally. This one was run by Indians. All our northern places where I was from were English or Chinese, so again this was new to me. Meghan told me her dad had been cold about me, and I explained he was probably just worried about his baby girl. She'd met a random guy off the internet after all. She insisted she'd told him about me and that he was playing up. I said I'd try and talk to him when we got back. I bought some strawberries from the shop on the way and handed it to Toby, her dad. "Thanks for having me. I'm sorry it was short notice. I only decided last night. Your daughter seems a bit upset, so I thought I'd come and say hello so you know I'm not a loony," I said, smiling. Neither of them replied. Mum looked at me and then back to the TV. Dad just looked at me blankly, like he'd never seen a real person before. "Well, if it's okay with you, I'll stay an hour and then I'll be off. Nice to meet you," I added. "You do what you want," Toby shouted. I was taken back, but that was just rude. "I can leave now if it's a problem," I asked him. He snorted and turned away. "Meghan, I should go, Doc. I think I've upset your dad," I said, grabbing my bag, feeling for a split second of relief before she grabbed my arm. No, please don't go," she said, almost dragging me towards the living room. "The neighbours, my parents are terrified of them. That's why they're so weird. It's because I stay up at night talking to you so they can sleep properly. They're just scared, that's all. I need a pill," she said through sobbing. "What's the matter?" I asked her. "I need a pill," she said, physically shaking, walking out the living room and back into the dining room. I should have walked out, but I could taste the abuse in the air. She was controlled, but it wasn't by any neighbour. I wasn't angry. This wasn't my fight, but I did feel bad for her. "Toby, I'm off. Listen, mate, I get it. You didn't know I was coming, and you don't know me, so I'll be off. But before I do, look. She's obviously terrified, and I saw no problems on the street. No cars on bricks, no graffiti, no broken windows, and her reaction, it's just not right. Is there something I should know about her?" I asked him. "Like what?" he asked. "Well, a mental condition and such. I know she's agoraphobic, but she's more to it than that, isn't there? She came to the shop with me just fine," I said. "That's the first time she's been out of this house in 3 years. You think you can help her? Nobody can. We've tried. She'll be fine later," he said. "Okay, thanks for your honesty," I told him, offering my hand. He shook it, and I left. I'd been stood at the bus stop less than 2 minutes when my phone rang. I ignored it. I sent her a text. "Try and relax. I have to go. I'll call you when home." Meghan was at the bus stop about 2 minutes after I'd hit send. "Dad says come back. He's sorry. You can stay," she said. "What? I've no intention of staying. I came to see you. I've done that," I replied. "Just a night. You'll see. They like you. Trust me." "Please," she added. "Okay, I'll come back, but I'm not staying," I answered. "Okay?" "Okay, whatever you like, but come back. Don't leave it like this," she said. Prize melon head here, returned Meghan. home. Could go off book for a minute. This obviously needs a little bit of work. As you will understand later, this situation doesn't pan out too well for anybody. Apparently I didn't change a few details in the book that I should have done. That's not fair to anybody, especially seeing as I'm actually not bitter in the slightest. So it should say, Prize Melonhead here returned Meghan to her home. The second the door closed behind us, all hell broke loose. Mother was shouting at Toby. You trapped my arm in the door, you little bitch. Who do you think you are? Ow! She wobbled forwards, arm lifted to slap Meghan. Meghan ran into the living room and slammed the door behind her. She must have been leaning against it, because her mum was leaning on it, it wouldn't move. I didn't, you locked me in my room, Meghan shouted back. I got out and you hurt yourself, she added through the door. I looked at Toby, who was cowering behind his wife. He looked scared that she might turn on him next. What are you doing here? She asked, but before I could reply she turned to Toby. This is your fault. What's he doing here, Toby? Tell him to get out, now. My mind has a habit during violence of shouting and... Oh! Excuse me, let's try that again. My mind has a habit during violence and shouting of slowing everything right down, so during this mad chaotic scene, I was actually stone cold calm. I also take in everything from what was said to what was meant, cutting through all the bullshit. It was a survival mechanism that turned up due to Wenzel's crap. A number of things became obvious. 1. Mummy was a bully. 2. Either Meghan or her mother were lying. 3. They both had some serious issues that I wasn't familiar with. 4. Her mother wanted to hit me. I could see it in her eyes, but she didn't know if I'd whack her, and so she refrained. She wanted total control, and she'd got that in Toby, but not in Meghan. Her usual slave was not doing as she was told, and she hated it. 5. Toby had no intention of fronting me. Whatever he did next, his wife would see it as wrong. If he did nothing, she'd have a got him. If he fronted me, she'd have a got him whether he won or lost. Finally, after several seconds' silence and nobody talking or moving, I spoke. Let me calm her down. When I know she's both calm and safe, I'll leave, okay? I didn't wait for an answer. I tapped on the living room door. It's me, open it, I said calmly. No, she'll hit me and lock me in my room, she replied. Her mother started gobbing off about her lying. I didn't care, I was talking to a door. Do you really think I'm going to let that happen? I asked the door. It opened and I went inside. We chatted for an hour and played pontoon. She told me she'd taken Valium, and shortly after her actions became weak and her mind unclear. What you got? I asked her. For anyone unfamiliar with pontoon, it's a card game. It's playing cards where you make up 21. So she should have been referencing numbers here. She told me she'd taken Valium and shortly after her actions became weak and her mind unclear. What you got? I asked her. Red one, she said, putting 3 cards down. Cool, you win, I replied, trying to cheer her up. Courtney called me. Are you coming home tonight? It was gone 10 o'clock. I went to see Toby, who was still in the dining room, but this time the mum had vanished. When's the last train, mate? I asked. Dunno. She alright? He asked all half-heartedly. Yeah, she passed out on the sofa. Do those pills always do that? I asked. Good, he said. Not Mr. Sociable then. I'm off, mate. See ya, I said, and he told me, wait a minute. I was intrigued, so I stood in the garden waiting for him. He returned inside 5 minutes. You stayed and calmed her down. You stay tonight. Go tomorrow, he half told me. No, it's okay, thanks though. I do appreciate it. Just point me in the direction of Manchester and I'm good, I said, trying to get my route in reverse order. Stay tonight. Go tomorrow, he said, walking back into the house, leaving me in the garden with the door open. I made a call outside and explained to Courtney what a pig's ear this had all been, and that I'd be back tomorrow. She laughed. A lot. And I can't say I blame her. I fell asleep on the dirty old sofa, as Meghan fell asleep in the armchair. I'm not going to spoil it, I'm going to end here, and we'll wait for chapter 24, which I'll do in the next few days with a bit of luck. It is, after all, the Easter holidays here, and so I should get some more time to myself. I finish work on Wednesday and I am free for 7 days. I am hoping to have Checkmate completed in relative audio format, and also the manuscript updated, because since I've been doing this in the name of transparent honesty, I found a few errors, which if you're self-publishing is always read your material back to yourself. Don't just run it through a couple of editing programs and edit it yourself and have a couple of editors look at it, because it's not the same as when you read it out. It really isn't. It's not so much the errors, there's no information that's actually wrong, it's just I could have phrased it a lot better than I have done, and this process is all about improving, whether that's on an emotional level or whether that's improving the writing, it becoming a skill. And I truly believe what Susan Jeffers says, when she's one foot in front of the other, and you may take several steps backward on any given path at any given time. That's part of being human. As long as you take 8 steps forward by the end of it, the end of that process, then that's what matters, and that's what's happening here. You know, I love the covers, I love the books, they've done really well, I'm immensely proud of them. But every now and again I'll find something, I'll be like, why did I say it like that when I could have said it in a more honest and accurate way? Or when I could have made it more readable, or more emotional. Not changed anything, just made it more accurate. At one point there, because of anger for things that happen later in the book, I've said I took Meghan back to her cave. That's not very nice, is it? You know? I took her back to her home. She had issues, but because of things that happened later on, when I wrote that part, I was reliving a lot of stuff. I've been through a fair amount. You know? So hey, if you're going to self-publish, maybe this will help in some way. I don't know, I've got a lot of people around me right now going through different things. A friend of mine's got split families. Another friend of mine's just lost a child. Another friend of mine's losing a husband. I'm extraordinarily lucky. My biggest concern right now, I have my food and will be ready for boxing tonight. And how quick can I get this uploaded? So, I don't have any real concerns. Going downstairs there, mate, play with the kids. I've got a really good life. You won't believe it when you read some of this book, but I do have a really, really good life. Till next time, take care of yourselves and each other.